so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butch-Chester. You guys know what I like to do on my show. Say it with me. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And that's what we want to do today. We want to get you fired up about my guest. I'll be spending time with Dr. Ronald L. Cole today, and we'll be talking about his book, Universal Spiritual Laws and Healing. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Dr. Ronald. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Great to have you. Now, as is tradition around here, we always give our guests a few seconds to give a little bit about themselves. We realize that there may be a listener that is unfamiliar with you and your work. So first question is, tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Ronald. What makes you you?
Well, thank you very much, Sharon. I started out with a BS and a master's degree in civil engineering at the University of Missouri. I then worked at Exxon Chemical Company and then served 2 years in active duty in the military and then returned. Following that, I followed my original interest in that's becoming a physician and eventually got an MD degree, so I've been all over the board here. I did an OB-GYN residency and then did private practice. And I developed a deep interest in spirituality and the scientific research of spirituality. I've done it for 40 years now. Mm-hmm. And I was a student of the Buddhist spiritual goddess Kuan Yin, which you can find her anywhere.
Right. Oh, I love it. Now let me ask you, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that writing a book was the best way to share your information, to share this resource of wisdom that you have?
No, I didn't start out wanting to do that, and I would never thought I would, but actually I got interested in spirituality, and I felt I really needed to spread the information out, so I felt that was the best way to get it out, particularly with the book we're going to talk about today. It can change everybody's life dramatically and can change the world dramatically.
Mm-hmm. Now, the title of your book, Universal Spiritual Laws and Healing, how did that title come about? Did you find that it came to you first and you kind of wrote around the title? Did it develop out of your writings? What's the story there?
Well, this book actually came from Spirit, and this was given to me by Kuan Yin, the Universal Spiritual Laws, and I saw the great value in them and felt that I needed to give that information out to the public for those that are interested in it. And I wanted to add some healing aspects due to being a physician, and that goes along certainly with the spiritual growth and everything. So,
Now, I try to ask this question the exact same way of all of my guests, and that is, when it comes to the reader of the book, would you say that it's appropriate for someone as young as high school, or do you need to be college age, have a little bit more life experience to be able to follow along?
No, I think, it's not the simplest book maybe to follow, but it can serve anybody. The laws are the laws and unbreakable laws that really govern our universes. And it's kind of like if you're going to play the game, you need to know the rules, and you cannot break them. So you need to know what you're dealing with the rules of the game. So I think it can be used from still high school or so.
Okay. Now, when it comes to reading the book, I firmly believe that authors present the work to us the way in which it should be utilized. What do I mean? But if they give us chapter 1 or section 1, that we should read that before moving on to the next chapter or the next section. Is there a best way to utilize the information that you have shared with us? Should we read page first before page last, or does that matter? Can we open up the book and start anywhere?
No, I think in mine, I kind of use an introduction, and it starts out with the primary universal law, which is the law of love, and all the other ones are secondary laws. So you really need to start at the first and go through, and it'll probably take you several readings to really get it, but it can really change your life very dramatically here. And if you follow the primary universal law, law of love, you'll actually be following all the other secondary laws. So it's the primary law, and it's best to start there.
Mm-hmm. No, we are Christian Talk Radio, and there may be someone saying, he's talking about spiritual laws, but I'm a Christian. Why should I listen to what he's sharing? Is Christianity and spirituality connected somehow? So for the person who wants to follow what you're saying, but they have that question, how would you address that person?
Well, I think spirituality is a little different than religions because there's many, many religions, and they have many different beliefs, and so I think that there's I'm a Christian also, and so I certainly have no problem with this. Although spirituality, I think, goes into things much deeper and gives us more insights to our relationship, and it seems to be more of a direct relationship with God. And I talk about that in the book, that we actually are a part of God. And so, it's certainly, a little different, but yet I had no problem getting into spirituality. And like I say, I've studied it for 40 years now, and I was brought up in the First Christian Church. So, I think it can serve us all well and help us to live a better life and everything.
So along that same vein, you mentioned that you were a practicing OBGYN. So that is science, right? That is learning all of the bits and pieces that go along in the medical field. As someone who is practicing spirituality, how did your science background gel with this newfound spirituality, this information that you have been given? Were you able to utilize both at the same time?
Well, I think very, very much so and everything. And I actually came out of medical school as a traditionally trained OB-GYN, and I realized that the taught techniques of working with pregnancy and delivery and healing as an OB-GYN needed much more improvement based on the truths of spirituality and loving truths, and the fact that healing and life comes from within ourselves, and we create our own life plan on our spiritual side of life. And as a physician, we have much to learn yet about the practice of medicine and healing. So by applying spiritual principles illustrated the need for change. I did some quite interesting things, which one was communicating with the unborn and newborn child, which taught me a great deal of truth. And if we want to look at that for a second, I had started communication with the unborn child early in working with some of the mediums that I worked with. And we were working with one at the time, and she, out of the clear blue, said, "Do you want to talk to the unborn child?" Now, she then repeated, I said, "What do you mean?" And she repeated, "Do you want to talk to the unborn child?" And I asked her, "Can you really do that?" And she said, "We can channel the spirit of the unborn child and talk with it." And I thought, well, gee, let's try it and everything. So the medium actually brought in the child. We had an extremely interesting and intelligent conversation, and I got a lot of insight. Now, being an engineer, I wanted to kind of check the validity. Now, let me mention what channeling is. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but that's when a medium actually allows a spiritual entity to talk through them. And so you can use the voice box and vocal cords of the medium and bring it in and let actually an entity on the other side come in. And so what I would do after I talked to the unborn child, I would record it, and then to check the validity, several years later, I would talk to the parents and ask the parents the same similar questions. And they had very, very similar answers, almost identical between the two. So that proves a lot of validity. Another example is one that involved healing. And this really gave me insight that there's a lot more to healing than they teach us in medical school. And so actually this lady came into my office and complained of severe pelvic pain after intercourse. And I took a careful medical history and found out that her general practitioner evaluated her and told her she had a sexually transmitted disease called herpes, and that's when she started the pain. And I could tell that she was feeling very guilty about it. And so I spent quite a bit of time talking to her about herpes and explaining much more to her than I'm sure the GP did. And then I educated her about guilt, which I knew she was feeling guilty. And then I gave her a very unique treatment plan that you will not find in any medical textbook. So, yes, it did change things quite a bit.
I love it. I love it. I want to get one more question in before we run out of time in this end of the segment. And one of the things about is God. Now, depending on your ethnicity, on your race, where you live in the world, we understand that God is source. God is great spirit. God is creator of the universe. He is king of the universe. You talk about God in your book. To make sure that we're all on the same page, and we have about 2 minutes left total, how do you address this entity that we call God?
I would say that God is combined totality of all the life forms in the entire spiritual and physical universes. And people will say that God is all and all is God. And the most important, God is an unconditionally loving and forgiving oneness that we're all a part of. It was explained to me that in the beginning of time, God fragmented itself into an infinite number of pieces that are having fun evolving and finding their way back to their original source. And many people in religions actually teach that we're apart from God, which is somewhat self-serving to those teaching it, and it's certainly not really true. We're actually a part of God. And I can give you 2 quick analogies. If you assume that God's a very large snowman made up of an infinite number of snowflakes, and each life form, such as yourself or myself, is one of those snowflakes that make up the huge snowman. So we all are a part of that. You can also use the analogy of drops that form the ocean. All these tie together that form the big picture. So basically, love and understanding, and we all share a part of that.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. I am so glad that I too have been taught that we are all a part of God, for we have his very breath breathed into our nostrils. So I love it. I love it. Well, Dr. Ron, it is time for us to go to break. But before we do, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of this book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, the title of the book is Universal Spiritual Laws in Healing. You can get it on either Amazon or at your favorite bookstore. And you can find me on on Facebook and a website, universalspirituallawsandhealing.com.
Love it. All righty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer, get us to open up, even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative. I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Butchchester. My guest today is Dr. Ronald L. Cole, and we're talking about his book, Universal Spiritual Laws and Healing. So, Dr. Ron, I want to ask you about that very thing, universal spiritual laws. Now, I can tell you that the majority of my audience, being Christian, probably have not heard of what you are about to explain to us. So can you tell us how many are there and what are they?
Well, I was given 24 of these, and they were given to me, as I said, by a spiritual entity and goddess. And universal spiritual laws are actually the unbreakable God-given laws that created and govern the physical and spiritual universes. And they guide you to create a loving and healthy life and world. And universal laws were not actually created, they create. So on the universal spiritual laws, the primary universal spiritual law is the law of love. And the other laws are called secondary laws. And some of those laws that I'll mention, the law of freedom of choice, the law of responsibility, the law of cause and effect, the law of forgiveness, karma, need, and truth. So all the secondary laws are of equal importance. However, as I mentioned, if you follow the universal spiritual law of love in a positive way, you'll also follow all the secondary laws in a positive way. So it's good if you follow them in a positive way. We could all, again, live in a perfect, abundant physical world with no physical disease or negativity. So we create these in our own mind. And so knowing the rules of the game of life, so to speak, on this earth certainly helps you make your life more positive.
Now, we know that we have been, as believers, we have been taught that we should love one another, right? We know that we have the 10 Commandments that tell us how we should govern ourselves, as well as the various instruction that we have been given in New Testament. But I love that Jesus tells us that we should love one another. When you talk about the universal spiritual laws, is there any one that is given a little bit more of a bold, of a highlight, the way that Jesus did the same for us, that says, hey, really pay attention to this one?
Well, certainly we would always, as I mentioned, pick the universal spiritual law of love, and that is basically unconditional love. And that has numerous definitions. But first off, it's God who has unconditional love for all infinite aspects of itself, and is also the most powerful energy in the physical and spiritual universes. It doesn't ask for anything in return, and it's without human emotion and judgment and expectation. So it's quite different than just the romantic love that we think about. So this is the primary universal law that overshadows all the secondary laws. And so if you remember that if a person or any life form can act in accordance with the law of love, it's automatically in accordance with all the other universal spiritual laws. So that is your key one, the primary universal one. And although it's a little hard to understand, but you can experience unconditional love without totally understanding what it is. I can give you a couple quick examples. of unconditional love involving humans, and one are parents and their unborn child, which usually changes as the child gets a little older and it develops a personality. And the other is humans and our pet dogs, believe it or not. Actually, the pet dog probably shows more unconditional love than most humans do. Also, did you ever think about if you spell dog backwards, it spells God? So I'm not sure that was a coincidence, because I suggest that dogs probably can show more unconditional love than sometimes humans can. So striving for the unconditional love in your life can change it in a very positive, dramatic direction.
And I can just kind of see in my mind's eye, if you will, all of my dog owners out there nodding their heads saying, yes, my dog loves me unconditionally, and we do not deserve the love of our pets. And I have to agree, our doggos are absolutely amazing, and they really do know how to be there for us. Agreed on that. Now, I love that you are reminding us to have that agape love, that unconditional love that we are supposed to have for each other. And you're right. Because we are human, unfortunately, many times we do place conditions upon that. You have to do right in order for me to do right by you. You know, you have to give to me in order for me to give to you. And that isn't exactly how it is supposed to be played. We are supposed to love each other unconditionally. Thank you for that reminder. Now, you mentioned something called an unbreakable law. I know someone has their hand up out there saying, wait a minute, don't skip over that, Dr. Angela. What does that mean? So, Dr. Ronald, let me ask you that for that person. Unbreakable laws. Can you tell us what is that?
Okay. As I mentioned, that universal spiritual laws were not created, but they create. And they're not like most human laws, such as a speed limit law, that if you don't get caught by the police, there's no consequences to you, even though you've broken the law. As I said before, if you treat the universal spiritual laws in a positive way, you'll get positive results. If you treat them in a negative way, you'll get negative results. So you always get a response and result from universal spiritual laws. So you can't avoid or break universal spiritual laws, and you'll always be governed by them. So it's quite different than our human-made laws.
I love how, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that it mirrors who we are. When we give love, we get love. If we are mean, evil, and nasty to someone else, don't be surprised when mean, evil, and nasty comes back to us. Am I understanding that correctly?
Somewhat, yes.
I love it. So do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I love it. I love it. Now, I know that in what you're saying, and you mentioned this word earlier, and that is karma. Someone is saying that if that's what you're talking about, Dr. Ronald, then I think I understand what you mean. We don't want karma to come back and bite us. Many people understand karma to be an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. What goes around comes around, even Steven, right? But how do you address the law of karma in your book?
Well, I think you bring up a very interesting point. And as you say, most people feel that the law of karma has negative implications, and that you must have a similar negative thing happen to you if you do something negative to another life form. But this really isn't true. Karma actually does not have to be balanced by a similar negative act, but karma is actually an aspect of love that can best be balanced by love and forgiveness and not retribution. Balance is replacing negative thoughts, words, and deeds with positive ones. Karma is actually an equalizing force that says whatever is required to put things in balance must and will happen, and balance will occur. So you see, again, love and forgiveness is the true key to a perfect life with balance. So it's quite different than a lot of people try to put negative implications on it.
Absolutely. And I find that many times in our humanness, we tend to concentrate most often on the negative aspect of life and not on the positive. And then you don't understand why there's so much negativity. We understand, or those who try to keep that balance understand that, where your focus goes, that's where the energy goes. That's what gets multiplied. That's what comes back to you. So do that good, be that good, and then you should expect for those things to come back to you. If you're always complaining, don't be surprised when there's a complaint. So I definitely follow you there. Now, speaking of those positives and negatives, depending on who you ask and at what stage of their lives, um, people have an interesting understanding of the aspects of God, the personalities of God. And a question that you get a lot is, well, if God is all this love, if source is love, if the world is love, why do negative things keep happening? Why do bad things happen? Is that something that you address in your book? How do we deal with the negative aspects of life when we understand that God is so much about love?
Well, I think that's a great question, Dr. Angela. And, since all is God, all that's done is done by a part of God. And because each of the infinite aspects of God are at their own level of evolvement, there's many at a lower level of evolvement that are creating negative thoughts, words, and deeds in our world and everything. So evolution is usually an upward progression. So it starts at a lower level and it progresses on up from there. Similar to a newborn that's not disciplined properly and behaves negatively, if the parents change their discipline techniques to a more positive approach to the child should evolve and do more positive behavior, and the negative things would become much less. A classic example of creating negativity is in the beginning, God gave us a perfect world, and we refer to it as the Garden of Eden. But unfortunately, mankind took a bite of the forbidden fruit and started thinking, speaking, and acting in negative ways. So our physical world became far less than perfect as we see it today. All you have to do is just read any newspaper or watch the evening news that headlines the negative behavior of life forms. So I felt that I needed to share the universal spiritual laws I was given to help mankind have a guideline to make this a much better world. So as we progress, as I said, we took a bite of the forbidden fruit, and we had to come up from there. So not all people progress at the same rate, and we certainly don't progress always in a straight line. And so negative things unfortunately do happen, and eventually you will evolve to overcome that.
I tell you, I'm loving this conversation with you, and I find that when I have a great time with a guest, the time goes far too quickly. So I have to give you that 2-minute warning again, Dr. Ron. But I want to get in one more question from you, and that is about our understanding of consciousness. So in religion, we understand that our goal is to aspire to live out the scripture that tells us or reminds us that we have the mind of Christ, that God's ways are not our ways, his ways are higher than our ways. So if we aspire to be more like God, then we can aspire to be our best selves. How do you address this level of consciousness in your book?
Well, I think your approach is very good and everything, and we do have numerous levels of consciousness. It's kind of like the structure of an onion in its layers. Our lowest level is what we use on a daily basis. Then comes the subconscious level, and since we are a part of God, we progress up through the Christhood level, and then the highest level being the Godhood level. The daily level of consciousness is one we've always aware of, and the levels evolve in both the physical and spiritual realm experiences. And we all evolve in different rates and also not in a so-called straight line, as I mentioned before. The evolvement is an unending process and can be in both positive and negative directions. So I recommend that you certainly make yours in a positive direction by using the universal spiritual laws.
I I love it. I love it. Dr. Ronald, thank you so much for spending time with me here today on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I have so enjoyed my conversation with you today. But before I let you go, could you remind everyone, please, one last time, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
The name of the book is Universal Spiritual Laws. You can find me on Facebook and at the website universalspirituallawsandhealing.com. And I've enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you. And listeners, we enjoyed speaking to you as well. We hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you again today. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone.